They say money changes people, but what they don't tell you is how it can shatter the very foundations of what you thought was unbreakable: family. My name is Sarah, and I used to believe in the sanctity of our family, in the unwavering bond between siblings, in the unconditional love of parents. That belief was a beautiful, comforting lie, and it all unraveled the day Grandpa George died. It wasn't the loss itself that broke us, but what came after.
Grandpa George wasn't just a grandfather. He was the patriarch, the glue, the gentle giant who held us all together. He'd built a small empire from the ground up, a chain of beloved local hardware stores, George's Goodies, that were as much a part of our town as the old oak tree in the square. His passing, while expected, after a long illness, left an aching void in all our lives. We cried, we grieved, we supported each other. For a brief time, we were a united front against the sorrow. But what came next? That was a different kind of pain. A pain that cut deeper than any loss. A pain that came from within our own circle.
The reading of the will. It sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it? Something dramatic and old-fashioned. But there we were. My brother, Michael, my sister, Emily, our Aunt Carol, and me, squeezed into Mr. Henderson's stuffy law office. The room was oddly silent, save for the hum of the old air conditioner and the rustle of papers as Mr. Henderson adjusted his spectacles. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a nervous energy that vibrated beneath the surface of our feigned composure. We all knew Grandpa was well off. His hardware stores were staples in the community, and he lived comfortably. But none of us truly grasped the extent of his wealth until Mr. Henderson, with his precise, measured tones, began to speak. He started with the sentimental stuff, the little personal touches that Grandpa was known for. Grandma Eleanor's exquisite pearl locket, an heirloom passed down through generations, was left to Emily, who had always admired it. His beloved antique silver pocket watch, a piece he carried every day, went to Michael, the spitting image of Grandpa in his younger days. And his incredible collection of classic vinyl records, spanning jazz, blues, and folk, was bequeathed to me. Sweet, touching gestures that for a fleeting moment made us forget why we were truly there, made us almost believe this was just a sentimental gathering. Then came the big stuff. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, a small, almost imperceptible cough that nonetheless seemed to echo in the quiet room. "To his beloved granddaughter, Emily," he began, his voice steady, "he leaves the sum of $500,000, along with the family home, free and clear, with all its contents, a place of cherished memories and future gatherings." A soft gasp escaped Emily's lips, her hand flying to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. A quiet, genuine smile touched my lips, and Michael gave her a supportive squeeze on the arm. We were happy for her, truly. The house was a place of endless childhood summers, of Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings, and she'd always dreamed of raising her own family there. Next, Mr. Henderson continued. "To his grandson, Michael, he bequeaths the controlling interest in George's Goodies, with the understanding that he will continue to operate and grow the business, maintaining its legacy and reputation in the community." Michael's eyes lit up, a spark of pure elation in them. This was his dream, his passion. He'd practically grown up in those stores, sweeping floors, stocking shelves, learning the ropes from Grandpa. He'd interned there every summer since he was a teenager and had even taken business courses specifically to prepare for this. This wasn't just money. It was a legacy, secured, a purpose laid out before him.
And then it was my turn. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in my chest. What would I get? A quiet hum of expectation filled the room, almost audible in its intensity. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, his gaze falling on me. And to his granddaughter Sarah, he leaves. He paused, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to say nothing or some token amount. My breath caught in my throat. He leaves the entirety of his remaining financial assets, including all bank accounts, investments, and shares, estimated at $20 million. Silence. A suffocating, heavy silence descended upon the room, far more profound than before. I thought my ears were ringing, a high-pitched buzz that drowned out everything else. $20 million? It was an astronomical sum, a number I couldn't even comprehend, a sum that felt utterly unreal. It felt like a cruel joke, a cosmic prank. I looked around, my gaze flitting from face to face. Michael's jaw was slack. His earlier elation completely vanished, replaced by a dazed, almost bewildered expression. Emily's eyes were wide, but not with joy for me, not with shared excitement. There was a flicker of something else there, something that looked suspiciously like shock. Then perhaps envy? And Aunt Carol? Her face had hardened almost instantly, morphing into a mask of pure disbelief. Then something far uglier, raw, unadulterated resentment. The meeting ended quickly after that, a blur of formal signatures and perfunctory goodbyes. We stumbled out of the law office and into the crisp autumn air. But the warmth of family, the comfort of shared grief, was gone. It had been replaced by a chilling silence, a palpable tension that hung between us like a shroud. Michael was the first to speak, his voice tight, strained, almost accusing. "Sarah, are you sure that's right? 20 million? Are you sure Mr. Henderson read that correctly?" Emily avoided my gaze, picking at a loose thread on her elegant black dress, her silence louder than any words. And Aunt Carol? She just stared at me, her eyes narrowed, a cold, calculating look in them I'd never, ever seen before. It was as if a stranger had suddenly appeared in place of my loving aunt. That was just the beginning. The initial shock quickly morphed into something far more insidious. The trickle of hesitant questions became a relentless flood of thinly veiled accusations. "Why you, Sarah? What did you do to get so much? Grandpa loved us all equally. This isn't fair." The calls from Michael and Emily became less frequent. Then, when they did come, they were filled with veiled accusations, passive-aggressive remarks, and subtle digs. "Must be nice, Sarah, to have such luck," Emily would remark, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Michael would sigh heavily on the phone. "You know, I could really use a substantial investment in George's goodies right now. Grandpa would have wanted his legacy to grow, wouldn't he?" Aunt Carol, who used to be so warm, so supportive, so full of grandmotherly advice, became the chief architect of the whispers. She started subtly spreading rumors among extended family members, hinting at impropriety, implying I had somehow manipulated Grandpa in his final, vulnerable days. "Poor George," I overheard her saying to a distant cousin at the funeral reception. "He wasn't quite himself towards the end, was he? So easily influenced." They couldn't believe it was Grandpa's genuine wish. They couldn't believe I deserved it. It was a vicious lie, a narrative designed to demonize me, and it tore at my soul, shredding the fabric of my trust in them. I tried to explain, to reason with them,
Grandpa had always seen my knack for finance, my careful budgeting, my cautious investments. He'd often called me his sensible one, a trait he deeply admired in a world of impulsive spending. He knew I wouldn't squander it, that I'd manage it wisely, perhaps even grow it responsibly for future generations. He'd even involved me in some of his smaller investment decisions years prior, asking for my opinion, listening intently to my suggestions. But they didn't want to hear it. Their ears were deafened by the ringing of $20 million. Their narrative was already written in stone. I had manipulated him, taken advantage of his old age, conspired against them. It was a ridiculous, cruel accusation, completely unfounded, but one they clung to with terrifying, almost desperate tenacity. The holiday season, once a joyous, boisterous occasion for our family, became a battleground, a frozen wasteland of strained smiles and bitter silences. Thanksgiving was a tense, silent affair, the delicious aroma of turkey and pumpkin pie unable to mask the stench of resentment. Every glance was an accusation. Every forced laugh felt like a betrayal. Christmas was even worse. Aunt Carol arrived at my parents' house with a lawyer friend of hers, a shark-eyed man named Mr. Peterson, who spent the entire evening subtly hinting at legal options and remedies for unfair testamentary dispositions. The air was so thick with animosity you could almost taste it like a metallic tang on your tongue. The Christmas carols felt like mocking whispers. Michael, once my closest confidant, my partner in childhood mischief and teenage secrets, started making outright demands. He wanted a loan for his business, a substantial one, claiming it was what Grandpa would have wanted, that I was holding back his legacy. He even had a business plan prepared, detailing how my money could save George's goodies, despite the stores being incredibly profitable. Emily, on the other hand, began to imply I should use my new wealth to help her pay for a grand, extravagant renovation on the family home, even though she owned it outright and was perfectly capable of affording it. "It's for the family, Sarah," she'd say, her voice sugary sweet. "For future generations. Grandpa would approve." It wasn't about mead. It was about entitlement, about a twisted sense of distributive justice that they felt was owed to them. And underlying it all was the bit of accusation that I had somehow cheated them, that I had schemed and manipulated Grandpa for my own gain. I tried reasoning, pleading, even offering small gestures of goodwill, a generous sum for Michael's business expansion, a significant contribution to Emily's renovation, a peace offering. But it was like talking to a brick wall built of pure resentment and envy. They saw only the number, the vast disparity and the profound injustice they felt had been inflicted upon them. The idea that Grandpa George, a man who cherished fairness above all else, could have done this seemingly unfair thing was anathema to them. They were convinced I had manipulated him, perhaps even coerced him in his final days. It was a ridiculous, cruel accusation, completely unfounded, but one they clung to with terrifying tenacity, twisting every memory, every conversation to fit their fabricated narrative. Then came the formal letter. Not a suggestion, not a request for mediation, but a cold, impersonal legal document, a notice of contest. From Michael and Emily, and Aunt Carol, their willing accomplice and instigator, pushing them every step of the way, whispering poisonous suggestions in their ears. They were contesting the will, claiming undue influence, meaning they believed I had exerted improper pressure on Grandpa and citing my sudden, inexplicable wealth as undeniable proof of my supposed treachery. My own family, my blood, taking me to court? The shock was bone deep, a betrayal so profound it left me gasping for air. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about my reputation, my character, the very essence of who I was.
The court proceedings were brutal, a soul-crushing ordeal that dragged on for months. Every private family moment, every casual conversation, every heartfelt gesture was dragged into the harsh, unforgiving light of a courtroom. Lawyers, cold and clinical, dug into our past, scrutinizing every conversation I'd ever had with Grandpa, every gift he'd given me, every word he's spoken about his financial philosophy. They twisted harmless anecdotes into suspicious circumstances, innocent remarks into calculated manipulations. Michael and Emily testified, their voices dripping with perceived injustice, their faces a mask of bitter accusation. They painted me as a conniving opportunist, a manipulative sister who had somehow charmed and deceived their ailing grandfather. Emily recounted tearfully how Grandpa had always promised her something special beyond the house, implying I had somehow usurped it. Michael spoke passionately about his rightful place at the helm of George's goodies, suggesting my inheritance somehow diminished his own rightful claim, despite having received the majority interest in the business. Aunt Carol, though not a direct claimant, was a master manipulator on the witness stand. She looked deceptively calm and sincere, a picture of aggrieved sorrow as she spun elaborate, insidious tales of Grandpa's supposed deteriorating mental state in his final years, despite clear and abundant medical records proving his absolute lucidity until his last days. She brought up old, petty grievances from our childhood, twisting innocent sibling squabbles into evidence of my supposed selfishness and materialism. It was a calculated character assassination, orchestrated by the very people who were supposed to love me, who had witnessed my life and knew me better than anyone. I felt utterly, completely alone. My parents, caught in the agonizing middle, were heartbroken, torn between their children. They tried to mediate, to appeal to reason, to remind us of the love that once bound us. But the chasm between us was too wide, too deep, filled with too much bitterness. Michael and Emily had become so consumed by their envy, by the perceived injustice, by the dizzying sum of money, that they couldn't see past it. They couldn't see me, their sister, their childhood playmate anymore. They saw only the inheritance, a glittering, tempting prize that they felt had been unfairly snatched from their grasp. The strain began to take its toll, not just on my emotional well-being, but physically too. Sleepless nights became the norm, my mind replaying every hurtful word, every false accusation. A constant, heavy knot of anxiety and despair lived in my stomach, gnawing at me. The gnawing pain of betrayal, of being attacked by my own flesh and blood, was almost unbearable. I lost weight, my appetite vanishing. My work suffered, my focus constantly pulled back to the nightmare unfolding in my personal life. My friends tried to offer support, but how do you explain your family tearing itself apart over money to someone who hasn't experienced that particular kind of soul-crushing betrayal? Then came the turning point, a moment that felt like a divine intervention, a whisper from beyond the grave. Mr. Henderson, my grandfather's calm, steadfast lawyer, presented a final piece of evidence during one of the most tense court sessions. It was a handwritten letter, impeccably preserved, sealed with Grandpa's distinctive wax seal, and dated years before Grandpa's final illness, long before anyone could claim undue influence. It was addressed to all of us, his beloved grandchildren. The courtroom, usually bustling with murmurs, fell completely silent as Mr. Henderson, with a deliberate solemnity, began to read Grandpa George's own words. In it, Grandpa explained, in his own thoughtful, meticulous hand, his precise reasoning behind his will. He spoke of his observations of our individual strengths and weaknesses, our financial habits, our life goals. He spoke of his desire to ensure his legacy was managed responsibly for generations to come, to provide for each of us in a way that truly served our best interests. He spoke of Michael's boundless passion for the business and how entrusting him with George's goodies would allow him to truly flourish and continue the family legacy. He spoke of Emily's deep love for the family home and how owning it outright would give her the security and joy she always deserved. And then he came to me. He wrote of my prudent and discerning nature, my careful stewardship of resources, my unwavering commitment to financial wisdom, which he believed made me the ideal steward of the bulk of his financial wealth. He explicitly stated that he wanted to provide for each of us in a way that best suited our individual capabilities and needs, not to divide us, but to secure our futures, to ensure his hard-earned wealth would continue to benefit the family for decades in his own unique, deeply considered way. He even added a line about how he hoped we would all be grown up enough to understand and accept his wishes and continue to love one another as family should. The courtroom was silent once more, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of tension, but a heavy silence of realization, of profound understanding, and perhaps for some, even shame. Michael looked down at his shoes, his face pale, his earlier anger replaced by a dawning comprehension. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not of anger anymore, but of deep regret and sorrow for her actions. And Aunt Carol, who had orchestrated so much of this pain, for the very first time throughout the entire ordeal, looked truly, utterly defeated, her mask of composure finally cracking. Grandpa's own words from beyond the grave, written with love and foresight, had spoken louder than any lawyer, any accusation, any twisted rumor they could conjure. His wisdom had cut through the greed and envy like a surgeon's scalpel. The judge, after a brief, somber deliberation, ruled unequivocally in my favor. The will stood, exactly as Grandpa George had intended. The verdict was a victory, legally speaking, but it felt hollow, tinged with profound sadness. I had won the battle, but lost so much more in the process. My family, as I knew it, was irrevocably fractured. The aftermath was complicated, messy, and far from a storybook ending. Michael and Emily, humbled by Grandpa's letter and the undeniable clarity of the court's decision, eventually reached out. There was no grand reunion, no instant forgiveness, no heartfelt apologies that erased months of pain. Just tentative, hesitant steps towards rebuilding. We talk, sometimes, about surface-level things. We acknowledge the hurt, the mistakes made, but the trust, that's broken in a way I don't know if it can ever fully heal.
Aunt Carol, consumed by her own bitterness and unable to reconcile with the truth, disappeared from our lives entirely. She stopped attending family gatherings, ignored phone calls, and eventually we heard she had moved out of state. A sad, lonely end for someone who was once a vibrant, cherished part of our family tapestry. She chose resentment over reconciliation, and ultimately, she lost far more than just the money she never received. She lost her family connections, her peace of mind, and perhaps a piece of herself. Grandpa George wanted to secure our futures, to provide for us in his own unique, wise way. He never intended for his immense love to be quantified by dollar signs or for his carefully built legacy to become a weapon that tore us apart. But sometimes, when a substantial amount of money enters the equation, the ties of blood aren't thicker than water. They become a catalyst for the darkest parts of human nature: envy, greed, bitterness, and ultimately, profound betrayal. My story is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the strongest family bonds can be astonishingly fragile. An inheritance meant to be a blessing can so easily become a curse. It showed me the true devastating power of money to corrupt relationships. It taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the people you can still trust, the relationships that withstand the storm, the peace you find within yourself. And sometimes the hardest lesson of all is learning that some things, once broken by such profound betrayal, can never truly be put back together again in the same way. The scars remain, a constant reminder of the high price of greed.